Hello again, students. For the learning objectives of this section, you will need to demonstrate how to document or draw or model requirements using use case modeling, writing formal use case descriptions based on that model, and writing user stories. This is just a brief overview, so please see the slides on your Canva. A user story is a narrative told from the user's perspective, describing his or her usage of a system. It helps us to define the value that a user gains from the system and the value that he or she places on particular actions in the system. It also helps us to manage requirements in an agile environment. And user stories are high-level requirement artifacts because we use post-its or little cards that emulate conversations with the stakeholders. So it will always be written in this format as a who, meaning the role, I want to do what, meaning the action, so that why, meaning the benefit that I want to derive from this action. And examples here are, as a customer, I want to select a car from the carousel so that I can complete the order. As a student, I want to purchase a parking pass so that I can drive to school. I'm sure that you can look at the case studies that I've shared and identify many more user stories. This is the format that we will use, and there is a reason why we stick to that format. So basically, the user story is defined incrementally into 3 stages. Using that format that I just showed you, it will be written on a card, and this will be a brief description of the requirement itself. Now this leads into an invitation with the BA to actually go and find out much more about the requirement. So engage in conversation with the user to understand the requirement, what they mean by the action, why they need to do that, etc., etc. And then lastly, it leads into the whole traceability of that requirement throughout the SDLC, and then eventually testing that that requirement has been delivered, and this is what we call the confirmation. So the 3 C's, and that is it about user stories. So please practice how to write the user story, because we will have many examples about it. Now we get to UML, or Unified Modeling Language. UML is basically a modeling language that enables you as a BA to communicate the requirements of a solution or a proposed system in a consistent, universal, and tool-supported language. By following a standard, we can ensure that there is no ambiguity or miscommunication within diverse and sometimes global teams of skilled professionals. Often when we work in large organizations, teams will span geographical boundaries, and being able to document using notation that is standard, we can avoid any miscommunication. So being able to use tool-supported techniques that are commonly supported and understood is extremely important for virtual collaboration. This technique will be used for modeling, which is basically giving us an idea of the real world, larger picture of the system in a miniature version. So a UML model is made up of many diagrams. A diagram graphically represents things and the relationship between these things. So these things can be representations of real-world objects, software constructs, or a description of the behavior of some other object. UML 2.0 divides diagrams into structural diagrams and behavioral diagrams. Structural diagrams are used to capture the physical organization of the things in your system, so how one object relates to another, or how your system is structured. And then behavioral diagrams focus on the behavior of the elements in a system, such as to capture requirements, operations, and the internal state changes of elements in your system. So here we want to understand the behavior, or how the system is meant to behave when a user engages with the system. So of the structural diagrams, we will learn about class diagrams in Unit 5, and of the behavioral diagrams, we will talk about use case diagrams in this unit, which is Unit 3. A use case captures the functional requirements of a system by illustrating the relationship between a system and its users. A user is referred to as an actor, which is related to a role filled by a user, not a specific user by name. For example, an actor could be an administrator or a secretary. By definition, an actor engages with the system to achieve a goal. So when we're looking at the use case diagram, we're going to talk about actors, we're going to talk about the system, we're going to talk about use cases and how the use cases are structured within that system, and then we're going to look at associations and how the actor engages with the system via these associations. Particularly when we're looking at these use cases, we can see that a use case, the ellipsis, is a scenario that describes the use of a system by the user to accomplish a specific goal. A use case indicates how each user interacts with the system, and a scenario is a sequence of steps that describe the interactions between a user and the system. So we'll have the actor, which is represented through a stick person like here, and we have the name of the role written just below the stick figure, and then we have a diagram and we have the use case description. These are the components of the use case model that we'll talk about. So we will talk about the diagram, and then we'll talk about the formal use case description, which we'll get back to in a minute. Now, when we look at documenting or drawing this use case diagram, the boundary represents the system, and this could be a website, a mobile app, a desktop software, etc. In this example, we are referring to a banking system specifically. So the boundary here indicates what is in the scope of the system and what is outside of the scope or within the environment of the system. Of course, we need to have an actor, and the actor can be a person with a specific role. In this case, we have a customer. The actor can also be another system or an organization or an external device. So the use case represents some kind of action. So this is the functional requirement that will be documented within the system. This is the functional requirement that the system needs to do. So open account is one of the functional requirements that the banking system needs to perform. And the customer, through the use of this association line, we can see the customer engages with the system and is able to open an account. So when we're looking at the actors, we have two kinds of actors. We have primary and secondary actors. In this case here, we can see that this is a primary actor because the customer initiates interaction with the system. So just to recap, we have in the use case diagram, we have the system, we have an actor or actors, we have use cases over here, and we have relationships. In this case over here, this is just a straightforward association. There are three other specific relationships which we'll talk about in a minute. So as I mentioned, the actors would be one of two kinds. A primary actor usually initiates an action on the system or the use of a system, and a secondary or supporting actor is usually reactionary. Also, the primary actor is usually written on the left-hand side of the boundary of the system, and the supporting actor is usually written on the right-hand side of the boundary. Then we have the four relationships over here. We have the association, which denotes a relationship between an actor and a use case. This is a straight line, as you saw in the previous picture. We have a generalization, which denotes inheritance between the use cases, and this is depicted through this notation of an open triangle. We have include, which indicates the functionality of one use case in another use case, or needing to be included in another use case, and this is represented through a dashed line with an arrow and the word include written just like this with these pointy brackets. And then lastly, we have extend. The extend functionality of one use case to another use case under certain conditions, and it's represented like this with the arrow pointing the other way. So here you can see the association is a straight line. The staff member here, this role, engages with this particular functional requirement, which is browse concept notes, for example. Then with generalization, think of this as a parent and child relationship. where the child inherits the structure, the behavior, and the relationships and the characteristics of the parent use case. The child use case is also referred to the more specialized use case, while the parent is more the abstract use case in this relationship. So as you can see, a make payment and all of the child use case is actually a kind of the parent, so it inherits all of the characteristics. Paying via PayPal, paying via credit card, and paying via EFT is all a kind of make payment. And then we have include. You can see that in order for me to check out, I need to do all of these three things: scanning an item, calculating tax, and payment. So all of these three use cases need to be included before I can do my checkout. Similarly, over here, in order for me to deposit funds, I need to do a customer authentication. So depositing funds includes customer authentication, and also withdrawing cash includes customer authentication. This is a mandatory compulsory relationship, meaning that I can't check out unless these three items are completed. On the other hand, extend is optional relationship. So here, if I want to register, the functionality of getting help on that registration can be extended to me if I register. So you can see that the arrow points towards the main use case and the word extend is written over there. This is optional, so I don't need to get help if I want to register. Similarly here, if I want to make a call, I can look up the phone number. So the functionality of looking up the phone number is extended to the use case of making a call. But if I don't need to use it, I don't need to use that particular use case. So we can see in this example over here that we have the ATM system, we have the boundary over here, we have a primary actor, and which is the user or can be a customer. We have a secondary actor, which is the bank. And then there's a straight association here indicating that this user can make a transaction. Over here, we see the bank can replenish cash, the bank can remove cash, the bank can secure the facility. Also, I can see that there's this optional functionality of cancelling a transaction. There's also the optional functionality of requesting assistance if I need to make this transaction. So that is an extend relationship pointing towards the main relationship with the arrow pointing this way. So that functionality can be extended to make transaction if I need it to be. On the other hand, if I look over here, I can see include. So make withdrawal includes replenishing the cash. If there's no cash replenished, I can't make the withdrawal. And you can notice that making the withdrawal would be on the side of the user, but the replenishing the cash is from the bank, and yet it is still include. So making the deposit over here includes the bank actually removing the cash. And then you can see the two generalizations over here. What this means to us is that making a transaction has four kinds of making a transaction. So I can make a withdrawal, and that is making a transaction. I can make a deposit, that's making a transaction. Checking a balance, that's making a transaction. And making a payment is also making a transaction. So when I have characteristics or parameters that I would apply to the make transaction use case, because of its generalization relationship, it will apply to all of the child use cases as well. So let's say there's a form for making transaction, or there's a security code or something for making transaction. It will automatically apply to all of these four as well because of the generalization relationship. Similarly here with make payment, because of this generalization over here, I have two types of making a payment, and I'm going to indicate that through this generalization. So whenever I have a kind of something, I must have the generalization symbol over there. Here's another example of the control system. I have three actors over here. I have four use cases, and here's no include, extend, or generalization, just straightforward associations telling me what the system must do in terms of scanning, setting limits, taking profile, calibrating, and what the user needs to do. Also, let me point out that when we write the use case, remember that I said this is a functional requirement. The use case must be written as a verb. So make a transaction, a verb and subject, or is it verb and object? And you'll notice that in all of our examples, it's written like that. I think this video will be ending soon, so I'll need to do a subsequent video to show you the formal use case description. That is all around use case diagrams. The following video will look at the use case description.